This is a story about Óglach Charles English, who was killed while on active service on the 6th of August 1985. It is also a story about his generation and community living under British occupation. It is a story about a Bogside Freedom Fighter.
Charles was born in 1964 into a sectarian state controlled by the Unionist Party. His community lived in poor housing, suffered discrimination in employment and education, and were treated as second-class citizens. In 1967, the people of Derry organised under the banner of civil rights and began to challenge the sectarian nature of the state, including the sectarian police force, the Royal Ulster Constabulary. The RUC tried to beat civil rights protesters off the streets. However, by August 1969, Free Derry was established and the RUC were driven out during the Battle of the Bogside. This was the first real taste of victory for the people. To stabilise the Unionist state, the British Army was mobilised onto the streets of Derry and Belfast. Widely seen as another armed wing of the Unionist government, it encouraged the rebirth of the IRA. Internment without trial and the events of Bloody Sunday, when 14 civilians were murdered by British paratroopers, further fueled the reorganisation of the IRA as an effective guerrilla force. Following Operation Motorman in July 1972, when thousands of British troops were mobilised, Free Derry ended and came under complete armed occupation by the British Army. The spirit of Free Derry, however, remained in the hearts of the people, and they continued to oppose British rule for over 25 years. Charles was the middle child of 7 children, born to Maureen and Mickey English. He had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He grew up on Cable Street in the Bogside, across the street from his granny and granda, Annie and James Doherty. It was a close family circle of uncles and aunts and well-known greyhound racing enthusiasts. By 1974, 3 of his uncles were in prison for IRA activity. Charles and his siblings were particularly close to their uncle Gerard, being the closest in age to them. Gerard was elected to Derry City Council in 1985 after being imprisoned for blowing up the Guildhall in 1972, the seat of gerrymandered Unionist power in the city since the foundation of the state. His family became the antithesis of their name, English. Despite this, Maureen had the family name proudly adorned on a plaque outside the house, much to the embarrassment of her children. It took years for them to confiscate and decommission the plaque. The family were strongly Republican. Both parents were members of Sinn Féin, and the family home was repeatedly raided by the British Army. On one occasion, the home was raided 9 times in one day. They took this in their stride. During one raid, soldiers broke a crucifix and had to fill in a damaged sheet. The soldier wrote on the sheet, "The crucifix fell but was not damaged." He argued with Maureen that it could be fixed with glue. She told him our Lord was nailed to the cross, not glued, and she made him score out the part of the damaged sheet which said it was not broken. 1981 was the year that state murder came to the English family home in Cable Street. In March 1981, Bobby Sands went on hunger strike, to be followed by 9 other Republican prisoners who were incarcerated in the H-blocks of Long Kesh, demanding to be treated as political prisoners.
Once upon a time there was Irish ways and Irish laws, villages of Irish blood, wake into the morning. Then Vikings came around.
In Derry, 15-year-old Paul Withers was shot at close range by an RUC plastic bullet on the 15th of April, spending 10 days on life support before he died. Several days later, on Easter Sunday, 19th of April 1981, the annual Easter Sunday parade had taken place. Tensions were particularly high this year because of the plight of the hunger strikers. Bobby Sands had only weeks to live, and Maggie Thatcher was determined to let him and the other prisoners die on hunger strike. Gary was returning from a football match and stopped at the junction of Craig Road to watch a riot between the British and the young people. Like most riots, There were more spectators than rioters. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a British Army Land Rover deliberately and recklessly ploughed into the small group of youths at Cragen Road, hitting Gary and Jim Brown. Jim was killed instantly. The impact of the Land Rover hitting Gary, massive as it was, had not killed him. What killed him was the same Land Rover reversing over his body as he lay in the middle of the road in his native city. This incident was not investigated by the RUC as murder, but rather as a road traffic accident, despite countless witness accounts that the army vehicles had recklessly ploughed into the group of youths. The soldiers were only charged with road traffic offences. The trial of the soldiers was deliberately moved to Belfast. They were found not guilty. The not guilty verdict was typical of how nationalists were treated before the courts. The family even had to fight for an inquest, initially being told by the Lord Chancellor that the trial had established the cause of death. Determined to get some justice for Gary, his father fought and won, and an inquest was held in May 1983, 2 years after the deaths. Again, the family were left shocked and disappointed. The state claimed he was killed by the first impact to his leg. The family expert pathologist from Denmark claimed that the fatal injury occurred when the Land Rover reversed over him. Again, the state colluded to prevent the true nature of Gary's death from emerging. Charles was 17 years old when Gary was murdered. He learned of his brother's death from the RUC over the phone. Maureen and Mickey were out looking for Gary as he hadn't returned home for his dinner. They were concerned because the news had filtered out that 2 young fellas were dead. It was about midnight. The phone rang. It was the RUC. The constable asked Charles to give a description of his brother Gary. He asked if he had any jewellery that he could describe. Charles told him, aye, he had a black stone ring on with a diamond on it. The cop replied, your brother's here in the mortuary, flat as a pancake. The story of Gary's death and how his family were treated by the law is a stark example of the nationalist community's experience. Internment without trial was used almost exclusively against nationalists, while British state institutions created, armed, and provided intelligence to loyalist murder gangs, leading to the murder of people on a grand scale. Charles grew up in the shadow of Bloody Sunday, where 14 innocent Derry people were executed on their own streets. So he knew how the law was used as a tool of the British government to cover up state murders. He saw how the rule of law acted in relation to the murder of his older brother. Charles was a popular and sociable young fella from a young age. He met many friends through sport and knocking about. He loved playing sports, in particular football. He won Sportsman of the Year at primary school. He played for both Celtic Swifts and Foyle Harps and would often be called upon for friendly matches locally. He carried his interest in sport and fitness into his later teenage years and spent a lot of time at Pilots Row Community Centre playing snooker, weightlifting and indoor football. He once spent £80 on weightlifting equipment, which he left at the gym at Pilots Row Community Centre for anyone to use. After Gary's death and the farce of the trial and inquest, Charles became more interested in political activity, as was common among his peer group. The hub of revolutionary activity in the bog was the Rossville Flats, where Charles and his friends hung out. When Charles turned 18, he joined the Irish Republican Army. However, before he did, he went and had a frank conversation with his father and told him, you tried it your way. It's now time for me to try my way. Becoming a committed volunteer in the IRA eventually became his full-time role in life. His activities around the flats ceased, except for having the crack with a group of friends there. His security as an IRA volunteer became his main priority. Charles took his role as an IRA volunteer seriously and was an avid reader of history and political books. Although he had many friends, Charles was particularly close to Richie Quigley. Like most best friends, they shared common interests. Theirs was a shared love of sport and the IRA. Sadly, on the 21st of April 1984, Charles' friend and comrade Richie Quigley was killed. Charles and Richie were on an IRA operation together in Derry city centre. They had planted a bomb awaiting a British Army vehicle. During the operation, they noticed a civilian walking around a car park near the target. They thought he could get caught up in the bomb, so Charles went into the car park to prepare to intervene. The man left the car park safely, and as Charles was making his way back, in a freak turn of events, the debris from the blast hit Richie, and by the time Charles reached him, he was already dead. Charles had to run and leave his best friend and comrade alone. This devastated him. All that he could do for his fallen comrade was a final salute. Draping the tricolour over Richie's grave, Charles and his comrades fired a volley of shots over their fallen comrade in arms. Charles continued in the IRA, becoming a very effective operator, and rose quickly through the ranks to brigade staff. He took part in and led many successful operations against British forces in his native city. Sadly, however, Charles had the honour of providing the same armed salute for other fallen comrades, Danny Doherty and Wally Fleming, who were murdered by the SAS in December 1984. The IRA opposed the existence of the artificial state of Northern Ireland and the system of apartheid that came with it. The IRA were very much of the community and were supported in their armed activities by a resistance community. Charles and his comrades, including Óglach Jim Kelly, they were not terrorists, but the bravest of freedom fighters. On the 6th of August 1985, Charles was killed while on active service in an accident with a grenade launcher he was carrying. This happened in the same area that the murders of Bloody Sunday had taken place, and 300 yards from where his brother Gary was murdered 4 years earlier. Eddie McSheffrey was injured in the blast. Their comrade Seamus Friedel gave cover fire while Charles and Eddie were driven to hospital by two passers-by, who were then arrested and detained for days in Strand Road Barracks. Eddie would later lose his life along with Paddy Deary on active service in 1987. At the time of his death, several of Charles' friends from the Roswell Flats were in prison. It was difficult for them to learn of his death while in prison. Within 1 year, a whole group of friends had been killed or were in prison. Such were the times that we lived through.
The story of Charles English's young life is a story of British oppression in Ireland and those who rose up against it. He died because of historical wrongs and because of injustice inflicted on his family and people.
Had he been born in Sharpeville, he would have been active in the ANC military wing.
Had he been born in Gaza, he'd have fought against the Israeli forces.
Born under an oppressive state, Charles English fought and died for freedom. This was a story about a Bogside freedom fighter.